Come on, you sissy, be a man. Don't cry. Grow some muscle, you puny wimp. Real men are ripped. Kick his ass. What? You ate a salad? Fucking rabbit food. Real men eat meat, and only meat, cooked over a fire on a stick. You want that woman? Fucking fuck her. What? She said no? So what? Inside every no is a yes waiting to come out. You just gotta get it out of her by getting it in her. Know what I mean? We all know what toxic masculinity is. Or do we? Why is it suddenly a thing the media is obsessed with? And is it really a new phenomenon at all? Where does it come from? Is it simply an inherent aspect of being a male? How is it taught? How is it reinforced? How is it represented in the stories we read and watch? How do we diffuse it? What is the antidote? Join me and my intrepid co-host, Jenn Zuko, as well as some other guests, as we embark on another semi-drunken exploration of the intersection of literature and society as we discuss problematic, toxic masculinity tropes. Here we are, ready for number 5. Which you have called number 5 of the problematic toxic masculinity tropes, sassy gay friend.
There's a subtrope. And I was wanting to start with a sort of reiteration of what these tropes actually mean, like before I get your summary of this trope.
Uh-huh.
Is that cool?
Yeah. Go ahead.
And what I mean like by the problematic, what this trope actually is.
Uh-huh.
Or what the problem is, I guess. So the female version of these tropes were called the problematic badass female tropes because I wanted to focus on the badass characters of female characters and why they're problematic. This series I'm calling problematic toxic masculinity tropes because, well, all male characters are kind of needing to be badass. Like the badass male is kind of redundant. And so I wanted to talk about what the problematic tropes are of male characters, which tends to be toxic masculinity. Uh-huh. And this one in particular, I want to look at that first word in the title of all of them, which is actually the most important one. The toxic part of these tropes is not really the most important part. It's part of what makes all of these tropes problematic. But the point is that these tropes are problematic. And the reason they're problematic is, as you pointed out really well in our conversation here with this document, is that the problems come in with these tropes, these trope characters putting up false and unrealistic ideals of hegemonic masculinity. And then there's this punishing of the male for not living up to these completely unrealistic ideals of hegemonic masculinity. And these come in different forms. They're different facets of the hegemonic masculinity. And we've gone through several of them so far. The sassy gay friend, and I think you pointed something out with this. So listeners, we had this really cool conversation on this Google Doc, because I had a Google Doc that's the outline of the article. This is one of the later articles that I haven't actually written and or published yet. So we're all having these like really cool like conversations on these documents.
And this was your rough draft outline that we looked at first, right?
This is a rough outline, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, which is great because I love doing that. I love having the outline shared with you, and then we can talk about it, and it like makes me go, I know exactly how to write the article now. This is what happened last time. So I know this is going to happen again today. But the thing about sassy gay friend, and then there's a subtrope as well, which is a kind of a different monster, though he's a very, very related monster.
Right.
But the sassy gay friend, the problematic aspect of the sassy gay friend trope is a few different things. And all of these different things have to do with the fact that the sassy gay friend is another sub-male, just kind of like the nerd was. Mm-hmm. And so the sassy gay friend can never be the protagonist. Uh-huh. If he is the protagonist, it's usually in an ensemble. There's not one who's a hero. It tends to be like a group of them, kind of like in Revenge of the Nerds, or in like, oh God, it's such a brain fart. TV show, bad nerd
Will and
TV
Grace?
show. No, bad nerd TV show. The nerd. I'm going back to the nerd trope.
Big Bang Theory.
Thank you. It tends to.
When did you start drinking today?
About an hour ago.
You're ahead of me.
Sorry, too many brain farts. So in the nerd type of sub-male, we tend to have them become ensembles and or comedic, or usually both.
Right.
The sassy gay friend can never be the hero. He always has to be, at best, a well-regarded sidekick. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't have any gravitas. He doesn't have any realism in his own character. He cannot be the protagonist of his own story because he represents a stereotype. And the stereotype is a sort of not quite opposite to hegemonic masculinity, but the sassy gay friend exhibits a lot of traits that are considered stereotypically feminine, which means that he is not living up to the hegemonic masculine ideal. And so therefore he is at best bullied, at worst, this is in real life, at best bullied terribly, at worst, like beaten the shit out of and killed, which is what happened to Matthew Shepard. And it even happens today. So that's where the problematic stuff happens with the sassy gay friend. And there's a lot of sassy gay friends. And actually there's a lot of sassy gay friends in satire and comedy. Mm-hmm. Where we bring out these feminine qualities of this guy because it's funny to see a guy act feminine, to see a guy act swishy, to see a guy act like this. It's funny. And so that's where the problematic aspects of it is. The toxicness of this trope happens when, and I think you pointed this out really well early in an earlier conversation, in the societal reaction to this trope, which is like, oh, that guy's a swishy, sassy, funny guy. He doesn't have any kind of gravitas. We can't take him seriously ever, pretty much. And he's always sort of a sidekick, or he's like a third wheel in a love triangle, or you know what I mean? Like he can't ever be a main character. There are some art movies that treat this differently, but that's an art movie. That's not a trope. So that's where the sassy gay friend comes in. And there's the subtrope of this one called the terrifying leather daddy, but we can talk about that later. So I want you to give me your summary of the sassy gay friend. Does that make sense though? All of that stuff I was just talking about?
I see where you're trying to go with it. But again, it's like I said, the thing that I saw when I read through the outline and when I was looking at the video references, part of the thing that...
I gave you several satires that were talking, like, making fun of this whole thing, but...
Because I think part of the reason that it doesn't... That I struggle with the way your outline is going in relation to the others is that I feel like, in our previous tropes, we are looking at these problematic images of masculinity, dealing with... And dealing with characters that represent those problematic aspects of masculinity, having to be big, having to be stoic, having to be dominant, and if you're not physically dominant, having to find a way to become dominant through subterfuge, which is what the nerd does, and failing that, you then become a neckbeard, which is just a violent, aggressive, hateful tool. And with this one, what I have a hard time seeing is that the problem I see particularly with the sassy gay friend trope is that it's really just kind of it's a way of gathering up the gay best friend stuff, the camp gay, group people are funny tropes that already exist, and just saying this is now a blanket term for these tropes, and they're not exactly they are problematic of their own in that they are stereotypes of gay people. But again, it's what we have here is in our previous ones, we have these tropes that represent this hegemonic version of masculinity that the character
except the nerd one doesn't. The nerd one
represents someone who is attempting to be hypermasculine in order to gain that hegemonic thing, right? He is being hypermasculine. He's being sneakier, using his intelligence. He's trying to do the thing. He is, he's by dominating other nerds. By dominating other nerds, he is setting himself up as the hegemonic male nerd.
Right, and the sassy gay friend is not even trying.
And that's just it. So that's why I think where we're pulling focus, because we're pulling focus in how these characters attempt to live up and set a standard of masculinity that cannot be attained. Whereas the gay friend and the terrifying leather daddy, these characters aren't attempting to
terrifying leather daddy is totally different. So let's just talk about the sassy gay friend first.
But the sassy gay friend, and even the sassy gay friend, is not attempting to compensate for his lack of masculinity. He's not attempting to. He's not giving us. He's not making us, the audience.
No, but he also
cheer for
is being punished.
His success.
Anyone who displays
at achieving hypermasculinity.
Right. No, you're right.
And this is more about.
But any man who displays any of those characteristics is going to be very severely punished.
Right.
There is still a "what are you, a fucking faggot?" There is still that denigrating hate speech that happens even now.
Right, but the problematic thing isn't the way that character is displaying or compensating for their lack of masculinity. It's with the external thing around it. Whereas the previous four were all about the problematic way that these characters were displaying their masculinity.
Right.
In an attempt to attain hegemony. I don't see
that's a problem. It's just a difference.
No, you're shifting focus on it. Which is you're not, the problem isn't the stereotypical characters, but the audience's reaction to it.
Well, stereotypes are damaging. Well, the fact that the sassy gay friend.
But the sassy gay friend in this context is problematic, whether we umbrella all of them under your new trope or break them out into the gay best friend trope, or
into
the camp
the little
gay
specific
trope,
ones,
or the already established ones. That's what I'm, kind of, there's macho camp, the sissy villain, that is kind of where the terrifying leather daddy fits under.
Well, macho camp is that same thing too.
And again, these are stereotypes that are problematic in and of themselves, that they are stereotypes of a certain set of people, but wedging them into the dynamic we've established with the previous tropes we've talked about is you're in order to do that, you're having to pull the focus away from what those characters are doing and instead focusing on what the audience's reaction to the characters is.
Because the audience is supposed to admire the first few that we've talked about, right? Or we're supposed to emulate them, or we're supposed to see how these trope characters are attempting to, they're doing their hypermasculinity and attempting to achieve hegemonic masculinity.
Right.
And we're supposed to admire that. Whereas the sassy gay friend isn't trying to do any of that. Those characters are problematic because of the stereotypes. And unrealistic portrayals of men that are gay, but also that the characters themselves they're not part of the hypermasculine behaviors. However, they are, anyone portraying any of those characteristics will be punished for not living up to hegemonic. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's still a matter of
by whom?
By the people who are watching and consuming the characers.
How are they punishing them?
This is the same thing with, men get beaten up and killed every day for being swishy, all the time.
But yet again, we're drawing this trope that exists within a film and pulling out and saying that the real important thing about it is how it happens in real life. And we were kind of wanting
done that to every single one of these tropes so far, though?
But that's not where we started. We started about how these characters.
Yeah, we did.
We started about how these characters.
It happens in real life every single time.
Yes,
from
but
the
we
very
get
beginning.
there we get there by a process of saying, here's how the character exists in the world of its story, and this is how men admiring those characters attempt to live up to it. Whereas what we're saying here is, here you have some swishy characters
who are unrealistic,
and so let's just go over here right away and say, and that makes people out in the real world attack gay people. That's too much of a direct connection and
I wouldn't
leap.
say that. I wouldn't say that. But I would say that's where the problematic aspects come in is in the unrealistic portrayal of real men, which is where all of the tropes come in. Does that make sense?
But what we're missing is the bridge. We're missing the connection. We're missing the way that the characters within the story treat these characters, which then allow people in the real world to say, oh, it's okay to treat the gay people in my life this way. That's what we're missing with this trope.
Right. I would say that good. Yeah, good call. So I would say that the way that the other characters treat these characters is either prejudice or sweeping them under the rug.
Or condescending or something like that. So the trope is really...
but they're not regarded as real men.
The trope then really is how I abuse my sassy gay friend.
Well, yeah, or how I don't pay attention to him or don't think of him as a real man.
So it's kind of like we did with the I'm only here for my vagina trope. It's where the character represents something there to provide a something to the straight character who is either within that hyper-masculine realm or supporting, or like if it's a woman character, supporting a hyper-masculine agenda.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
I think that's the thing that's missing from the outline is we've got to have, because in all the previous ones, we've had this thing is that here's a character who acts a certain way within the context of the story, and then that takes people who admire that character in real life trying to emulate that character. Well, if we're just focusing on the sassy gay friend and how that sassy gay friend is less manly than me, the real person, well, we're missing. There's just as likely in that movie. Well, take for instance, what was it? My Best Friend's Wedding, the one with Rupert Everett and he does not. Have you seen that movie?
No.
He does not represent the swishy, ow. He doesn't fit into that trope of you see me of like the sassy gay friend shorts with the guy that's...
Well, then that's not... that doesn't represent it then.
Right.
I'm talking about like the stereotypical type trope characters.
Right. But what I'm saying is that what we have to do is we have to identify where it is in these situations where these straight people who have these sassy gay friends are able to exert their, gender superiority over this person that does not live up to that thing.
Well, I mean, we're talking in this case about like good representations of characters then, not trope characters.
Right.
In that
exactly.
case.
That's the point I'm trying to make is that in the previous ones we have, when we talked about
we've had anecdote characters.
We've had anecdote characters. And so we have, right, what makes... Is it just the portrayal of Rupert Everett's character in My Best Friend Wedding that makes it the antidote, or is it the way that Julia Roberts' character treats him that also makes it an antidote? You see, that's the thing. That's the dynamic that we have to get onto is how, because we can't have a problematic masculine trope without the tension being in between the character we're focusing on, which is going to be the gay character, and the way the straight characters that the straight audience is going to identify with and see that reaction. Does that make sense? And I don't see that in the essay here.
It's more than that. It's more about how the sassy gay friend trope, and not the realistic portrayal of gay men. That's a completely different thing. And we didn't have to do this with the female tropes for some reason, which I find kind of interesting too. We're not finding real life differences. We're not finding anecdotes with the female characters, which I'd like to have a whole nother podcast episode about that. But it's about how the sassy gay friend is another version of a sub male, and they are treated as such. When it's a trope character, not when it's a good realistic portrayal of a gay man. There's all kinds of stuff like that because they're male characters. We have lots more of them than we have female characters. Therefore, we have plenty of anecdote chances that we don't really have with the badass female trope. So yeah, there are portrayals of that too. And I don't know, I would kind of also be careful about only looking at this particular trope stereotype character as he is in relation to straight characters.
Okay.
I don't know that I am comfortable with that completely. I think that you're right in that this has a different focus, and that the reason that this trope is a problem is in the way other characters view him as opposed to how he is attempting to be himself.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It's the way that other characters view this character that provides the lens for social perception.
Yes, and if we even go further than that, like if we talk about the other tropes, we're talking about like people who consume these tropes are, if they're swallowing them, whole without thinking about them. So they're just consuming these tropes, and they are supposed to admire these trope characters for various reasons that we've gone over, right? Mm-hmm. Or that, and even with the other sub-male trope that we talked about last time, they're at least supposed to admire their chutzpah. They're supposed to admire their, stick-with-itness and their attempts.
At some point, the audience is being asked in the previous ones to identify with the character. To identify with them, right. And in this case, it's the opposite. They're asked to sweep this character under the rug, to think of them as a minor person no matter what kind of character they are. But are they...
And that I think is where the problematic aspect of it lies. I mean, a trope, it just means that it's a repeated thing that you see all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. Right. When it's a problematic thing, means that it's a stereotype and it's unrealistic and it's unfair. When it's toxic, it means that the people who are consuming this trope are meant to look at this character with either downgraded views, or like they're supposed to be only a comedic relief. Whenever anything actually serious happens, they're nowhere to be found.
But then that not necessarily can apply to just gay characters.
It's the sassy gay friend. No, it's the sassy gay friend trope. I'm talking about this particular trope, not just all gay characters.
No. What I'm saying is that type of thing where you have a character that is supposed to be seen as lesser than something else, and it's just there for comedic relief. It's just, I mean, there's you.
No, very specifically because of their gay. I hope that my air quotes are very audible. My audible air quotes. Their gay characteristics. It's this whole fear of appearing feminine, of having feminine traits, of whatever this hegemonic masculine society deems as feminine traits. Because specifically of those feminine traits, this character is deemed as lesser than. They cannot be their own hero. They're funny. Because a man who acts like a girl is funny, right? All the time. They can't actually be a real human.
A girl who acts like a man is funny. So
no, a girl who acts like a man is a tomboy, and that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different kind of trope. A girl who acts like a man is not always funny. A man who acts like a girl is always funny. Always.
I don't know. I think we have a different definition of. I think we have a different definition of funny, because there have been lately a lot of women acting like men and being funny. I mean, the entire Bridesmaids movie was.
Yes. Oh, there is that. Yes, absolutely. But I mean, not always. It's not immediate. Like, a woman acts manly. She's not always hilarious. A man acts like a girl or dresses like a girl or whatever. That is most often trope-wise. I'm talking trope-wise in Hollywood, not in real life.
Yeah,
real life.
Well, so am I.
Real life, everyone's different.
There's lots of
men are usually funny when they're perceived as feminine. It's funny, and we look back at the nerd trope and look back at those videos about the Big Bang Theory. That's exactly where a lot of the humor in that show comes from. Is when the men in that show are perceived as being even more sub-male than they are, which means that they're perceived as more feminine. And the more and more feminine the man appears, the more funny, the less serious.
What's the differentiation between that and this, aside from the fact that these characters are gay?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe there isn't. Maybe they're both one.
You know, because again, I mean, like I said, my big thing is
you know what? Actually, I think that you pinpointed the difference between the two. I think that your talk with me last time about the nerd, and especially separating the nerd from the neckbeard, I think that you pinpointed that very well, in that the thing about the nerd is that they are a very similar sub-male. In fact, you probably couldn't tell the difference between them, especially if you look at the character Raj from Big Bang Theory. Except that the nerd is trying to be the hegemonic masculine ideal. The nerd is doing the hyper-masculine behaviors, and they are actually downgrading their friends in an attempt to get to that point. Whereas the sassy gay friend is actually even more, the stereotype of the sassy gay friend is that the sassy gay friend is actually more of a woman than he is a man. And so he's not doing the hypermasculine behaviors to attempt to be the hegemonic masculine ideal. But the comedy that comes with, and the not taking the character seriously, still does come from the sub-male thing, you appear feminine, you have all these feminine traits. Right. So that kind of core of it, or the base of it, is still the same.
But here's the thing then, by not being the focus of the story then, what makes it different than the already established tropes that we've seen? Aside from not being the center of the story, what makes them different from the regular gay best friend stuff, or camp gay, or queer people are funny? What makes it different?
It's all an umbrella. That sassy gay friend is an umbrella, and all of those are more specifically descripting ways of describing the same trope. Unless we start talking about the terrifying leather daddy, in which case another of those other tropes, like two of those, would describe that one. I would say the sassy gay friend is a way to describe all. What happened to your beer?
Fucking Nat.
Your listeners are going to have no idea. I'm watching Jason put his hand in his beer and go, what the fuck? You're going to drink the Nat? Why would you drink the Nat?
Well, I didn't drink the Nat. I got it out. But, if it did, it was protein.
Ew. Gross. What protein?
What protein? Because I have to get big, right?
Right, because you have to do hypermasculine behaviors in order to achieve your unrealistic hegemonic masculine ideal. Speaking of that, can we go on to the basic summary of the terrifying leather daddy, who is a subtrope? He's not the same thing, but he's a subtrope because it has to do with the terror of homosexuality.
Well, go ahead. I'm still trying to.
Does that make sense though? Can you see the difference there and also the similarity?
No, I'm still not convinced.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we just need to keep writing and talking about it.
Because I think for the
your questions have actually clarified this to me a lot. I totally get it now.
For me, rather than it being a trope by itself, it's part, I think, of a larger trope of of how we portray. One of the things that went on with the problematic badass female tropes was that there was always the tension between what they were trying to do, the badass female character, and the punishment that was leveled against them for being a badass, right?
Right.
And
I still see this in this trope, so I'm not saying how you're not seeing it.
I don't, because in none of the outlines here do I see how they're being punished, aside from being secondary characters, and that's not a problem. That's not a...
Sure it is.
That's a writer problem, not a character problem.
Yes, it is. Of course it is. Why can't we ever have a gay man as a protagonist?
Oh, we do.
No, we don't.
Yeah, we do.
How do we have a gay male hero? Specifically a sassy gay male hero, not a cis, hegemonic, basically, except that he's homosexual male hero. When do we ever have him as a central protagonist telling his actual story instead of being a stereotype and a sidekick.
There's a show called The Real O'Neills. A family's bond is strengthened when the youngest son tells his parents that he's gay.
Have you seen it?
No. Have you?
Okay. No. Okay.
All I did was query and went to IMDb looking for TV shows with gay lead characters.
Right. Well, I would need to look at that and see, is he, I don't know.
There's 13 Reasons Why follows teenager Clay Jensen in his quest to uncover the story behind his classmate and crush Hannah and her decision to end her life. Apparently that's got a gay male
different.
lead.
Yeah, that one doesn't. That one is
The Halcyon, the story
classic.
of a bustling and glamorous 5-star hotel at the center of London society and a world at war. Riverdale apparently has a gay lead. Scam has a gay lead. Class has a gay lead. Eyewitness, Barracuda, The Real O'Neills, Crashing, Shadowhunters, Merle, This Life, London Spy, Cuffs, Boy Meets Girl, Grace and Frankie. Oh, Grace and Frankie.
Is that Will and Grace?
No, Grace and Frankie with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Schitt's Creek. Banana.
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, isn't she the main character?
Well, she is but the other lead is her friend. What's his name?
No, not other lead. No, that's her friend. That's her sassy gay friend. That does not count.
Yeah, Titus Burgess is one of the leads. He is a gay male lead in that.
Not one of the leads. It's the central hero, the protagonist. Not one of the leads. Not the guy who's going to get best supporting actor. The central character. The one that the story is about. Not her best friend.
Oh, and then there's the Birdcage, if you really want to get with gay male characters that are at the center of the movie.
Yep. Those are two. But they're also portrayed as being really comedic, and they don't really have anything. You know what I mean?
I see where you're getting at, but I'm just.
I think you're absolutely right that I need to be super detailed about this. And I need to watch a lot of things.
Because
you're not seeing where the problem is. Is that what it is? I'm seeing that the stereotype itself is a problem. The fact that he can't be a hero.
The thing that I see is that I see that obviously when you have the gay best friend, the gay sidekick, the queer people are funny trope, those are problematic because of the way that they stereotypically treat gay people and use them as comedic relief and remove them from their own story.
Right.
And to me, that's problematic in and of itself. It doesn't need this umbrella term unless this umbrella term can be somehow brought to show that this is because even though you have made this point that your focus is on problematic male tropes, we already have. But what we're looking at is the way that it creates toxicity as well.
Which is exactly that. It's that this kind of character can never be a real man because he is feminized because of all of these characteristics. They're considered not hegemonic masculine. That's where it fits in.
Right, but that in and of itself doesn't constitute toxicity.
Sure it does.
No, that's just plain old homophobia.
That's toxic, isn't it? Why is that not toxic? Why is considering
depends
a man
upon your
has...
degree of homophobia, though, doesn't it? Just like it does with repression of your repression and control of your emotions. I mean, when it's
that's toxic.
Not all the time. There's a difference between having control of your emotions, which is knowing what your emotions are, being able to express them, to feel them, but keeping them contained and being sloppy with them.
Yeah.
And there's homophobia, and then there's toxic homophobia, which is the homophobia that leads to violence and aggression. But
I disagree.
But without this,
I don't think both of those things exist.
I think they do.
You can't have homophobia and have it not be toxic, because the whole point about the toxic masculine thing, because of course, let's reiterate yet again, toxic masculinity is not masculinity. Toxic masculinity is this unrealistic ideal of hegemonic masculinity.
Right.
That's stupid.
Right.
It does not mean, it's not real life. It's not how real men need to or should be. But it's this weird ideal that all men are expected to live up to. And that's exactly what homophobia is. Homophobia is that. It's like, oh, you're a fucking faggot. You are feminized. You're squishy. You are not really masculine. You aren't all of these things that are supposed to be masculine. That's what homophobia is. And it's also a fear of homosexuality in particular, which is a whole nother monster. The fear of homosexuality and the fear of penetration is a whole other thing we could go on about with like psychological stuff and everything. But there's no difference there is no such thing as homophobia versus toxic homophobia. It's the same thing. If you're denigrating a man,
there are ways to display homophobia that are not violent.
Yes, but that toxic doesn't mean violent always.
No, but
to display homophobia is being toxic, whether violent or no. Just like displaying racism is toxic.
Well, it's definitely being an asshole, but I don't know that it constitutes toxicity in the way that we framed it up already before.
It's being toxic.
As an asshole, I would say no. I would say there's a difference between being an asshole and being a toxic asshole. Speaking as an asshole, I would just say
you know what?
That there's a line.
I'm also an asshole, and I agree with that. However, I do not agree that there is a difference between homophobia. There is no such thing as plain old homophobia, which is
sure
fine,
there is,
and toxic homophobia. No, there is not.
Sure there is.
No, I totally disagree. I'm not going to agree with you about that.
So,
if you're homophobic,
you can be scared of gay people because you don't know any gay people.
That's different.
And then you can be scared of gay people because you are secretly scared of your own homosexuality and therefore must violently repress and suppress that. That's toxic. Being scared of gay people because you don't know any isn't toxic. It's just ignorance, and that can be remedied. Toxic homophobia cannot be remedied because it's about the self-repression, about what's going on inside of you, the fear that you are secretly that gay person, and so you must punish the gay person because that's a way to assert it. And that's different than just being like, gay people are scare me because you don't have some weird idea. You don't know what they're really like. You don't realize that a gay person is not the stereotype that we see in this film, but just a weirdo down the street that...
Let me redefine this then.
Okay.
It's not what's going on in your brain. That's the problem, and that's the toxic thing. What's going on in your brain... If you're scared of gays, okay, I'm sorry. Hopefully you can work through that. That's cool. Right. I'm not saying you. I'm saying quote unquote you. That's fine. I'm sorry, and I hope that you can work through that. And I hope that you can have the intelligence and the openness to be able to work through that. It's not what's going on in your own brain. It's the things you say and do that makes you homophobic, that makes you toxic. If you call someone a faggot as a hate speech, which it just basically is now, that's toxic. Punching a gay guy in the face because you hate him because you're afraid that you are gay, also toxic. Now there are various degrees. Obviously, just flinging hate speech is not the same as killing Matthew Shepard, torturing him and killing him against a fence. Like, these two things are not the same action, but they are both toxic actions. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why I say there's no such thing as
And then you told me I couldn't bring up
okay.
violence, but all you've done is talk about either verbal aggressions or physical aggressions. And where is the... Because one of the things we have to talk about is...
Well, that's what it is. It's about violence.
But this is the thing. In these situations where we're looking at the gay best friend stuff and we're trying to roll all this under gay is funny, all this other stuff into these tropes, it's usually the best friend, right? So how So this is where this is where your problematic trope has to exist then, in my understanding. It has to exist within the dynamic between your straight character and your gay best friend. This is where that problematic thing has to be.
No,
right?
I think that the problematic aspect of it is the fact that the gay best friend can't ever be the straight hero. Or if they are, it's all about, like, it's a movie about being gay. Like, you know what I'm saying? They can't just be, like, you can't have Indiana Jones be a gay guy.
I think you're making the same point I'm making, and we're just not using the same language because that's the problem. That's the thing, is that the reason you have a gay best friend as a side character or a sidekick is because they are gay and can't be the hero. And so that tension has to be, what is the heteronormative thing that's going on in this dynamic between your straight lead, whether it's a man or a woman, and their gay best friend, that relegates this character to second-class status, to be diminished, to be looked down on. This is where your trope has to exist.
Yes.
Not within how the gay character is representative. That's a component of it. The trope is in the relationship between the two.
True.
Because that's what establishes the primacy of straightness or manness,
right? Because that's the
over
normal,
the gayness.
Right? Yeah,
right. That's where it has to exist.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. See, that totally makes sense. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. That's what I've been trying to get to the whole time, because that's just by itself, it's the gay friend trope, or it's the gay people are funny trope. Where you have to get the masculinity involved in it is how we establish the primacy of.
Right. Okay, I see. It's like a hierarchical kind of thing,
right?
Isn't it?
Which is what which when you're dealing with masculinity, everything is hierarchical.
Of course it is.
More so than it is with women. It's all hierarchical with men, and you cannot have a problematic masculinity anything without first establishing what the hierarchy is.
What the hierarchy is. Yep. Exactly. Right? Exactly. No, you're right. Oh, and so that's an interesting thing too, because like what you were talking about before is that this is our first maybe problematic trope that is not either high up on the hierarchy or is not trying to get up in the hierarchy. It's just down in the hierarchy, and that's why it's a problem.
Right, because if you have if you have your sassy gay best friend who's attached to a female lead, what is he trying to do? He's trying to get the female lead attached to a dude.
Yeah, straight dude.
And if you have the sassy gay friend
not a bi dude.
Right. If you have the sassy gay friend attached to a male character, what's he trying to do? Get that male character to get a woman, which is all about establishing sexual dominance. And so this is...
Yep. Oh, that's the hierarchy. Right. I think that's the key word that you just pinpointed. That
it's gendered sexualized hierarchy.
Hierarchy.
And yes, you can start
gendered,
to develop a
sexualized hierarchy. Thank you.
And so it has to be that relationship between. It's the sassy gay crutch, if you want to call it that.
The sassy gay crutch. Does it snap? It goes like this.
Yeah, because that character's really only there, and he might get a side story like in Reality Bites. Yeah,
like maybe hopefully he's well portrayed, quote unquote, giant.
But he's still there to help establish the main storyline, which is the primacy and the dominancy of heterosexual relationship, which is the epitome of patriarchy. Patriarchy demands heterosexual relationships.
Well said.
Right.
Always there. It's okay. Yes. All right. Thank you. Okay. We're totally. Because that's what I'm trying to say.
And you thought we were going to have a fight. God.
We did have a fight. It was a
really
delicious
fight. We did not have a fight.
Too.
We had a debate like a couple of rational drinking human beings.
A couple of rationally drinking intellectuals. We have actual debates like a couple of drunk intellectuals. God damn it.
And people think we just make jokes about bad assholes and demon babies.
And we do that. in an intellectual and drunk manner.
But
we also solve the world's fucking problems.
You have never had a snooty, drunk demon baby asshole before.
I've had several.
That didn't make any damn sense. Who let the demon baby out?
You know what? I I'm fine. I'm not going to describe to your listeners what I have in front of me that I'm consuming right now. I think that this whole thing about centering on hierarchy, in particular with this trope, especially with the subtrope, is so important. And that makes total sense. And we are saying the same thing, and you're right.
Right.
Okay.
You just needed, it's just like, because your outline was rushed together off of basically a paragraph description. And what we're doing is we're doing some of the stuff that I think you had maybe imagined us doing as you were writing the essays, which is having a discussion to kind of help you clarify what the thing is.
Of course, yeah. The other ones we did after they were already published, so I already had it all.
And then the nerd and the neckbeard was just a matter of differentiating between, the nerd being the one who's trying to fit in any way he can, and the neckbeard's like, "Fuck you, we'll just kill everybody."
Yeah. No, you were right about that too. That's a whole different dynamic, and that was really cool to find out.
Yeah, and now you can get into talking about how this trope takes, non-standard male identities and treats them as second class, as worthless, as diminished. It's how we sit out there and we don't take,
because the hetero thing is the only real thing, right? Yeah, right. And so that's Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
That justifies resistance to marriage between two men or marriage between two women. Why the fuck would you care, man? It's not about that. It's about between a man and a woman because Jesus had a thing. And it was like, what the fuck? Who cares?
You know what? Jesus was probably fucking at least half of his apostles, but whatever. Oh no, I'm gonna lose all of our listeners right now.
No, all of them. I think you totally misunderstand the demographic of this podcast.
Okay, well, I mean, you're in Kansas, but good. I'm glad. So can I just say 2 sentences about the terrifying leather daddy and let me write about it? Now that we said this about hierarchy and that the hetero is the only real giant loud air quotes thing, that's a great thing to center this entire essay on. So
right. And it also frames the leather daddy as well, the terrifying leather, because what the leather daddy is he's big. He's muscular. He's dominant, usually violently, usually sexually violently, which is all usually the realm of the heterosexual male hero, the hegemonic male hero, in fact, except for one big difference. And so there's that terror then of either being treated like a female or being seen as female. Right, because the terrifying leather daddy has the potential to not only defeat the heterosexual male lead, but to fucking penetrate him badly. Exactly. Right. And in that way to defeat him, to make him into the role of the female in this kind of a horribly truncated Hollywood vision of gender. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And that totally makes sense too. If I'm looking at hierarchy, then that's why the terrifying leather daddy is terrifying. You just know when that guy in Thunder Road got a hold of Mad Max, the first thing he was going to do was punish that butt. Oh, absolutely. And that's why he's scary, right? That's scary to the straight man. Well, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. And because he's big and strong like a straight man, he's scary to everybody, but he's particularly scary. And dominant and violently dominant and sexually violently dominant. All of those things are very important. So he should be particularly frightening to the straight man. Yep. Okay, so no, that's great because so now we have I'm going to put hierarchy on my outline again. I'm going to put it down there again because that's very important. Yeah, because the hierarchy is the central thing because all the gay best friends there are supporting. Yes. Because then I have at the bottom here of my outline. Let me just read this to you, listeners, and Jason. These both the sassy gay friend and the terrifying leather daddy are both problematic and toxic because they represent a feminized, dehumanized, or monsterized gay male character. So it's not realistic, and it's either opposite to or it's a mockery of the giant air quotes norm, which is the heterosexual hegemonic male character, right? And so this is about the hierarchy. And the reason why the sassy gay friend can never be up in the hierarchy is because he
he does not live up to the hegemonic masculine unrealistic ideal. And the reason why the terrifying leather daddy is terrifying is because he lives up to every single part of the hegemonic masculine ideal, except for one very big difference, which is what makes him a threat in within this hierarchy that we're talking about.
Right, but you've got to set up the hierarchy first for these to be
exactly.
Because
the hierarchy needs to be
the terrifying leather daddy is subservient to the male villain.
Well, but the terrifying leather daddy is often the male villain,
or can be the male villain, and when you're dealing with the gay friend thing, they're both contrasts to the hegemonic masculine ideal in different ways, but it has to do with this hierarchy, which is the most important thing. I need to talk about that first and foremost. Right. They're there to support the patriarchal standard.
Yes.
That has to be the thing that you have to establish first.
Exactly.
Otherwise you're just regurgitating those other tropes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And tying them into the way that patriarchy needs to reinforce itself by domination, by subservience, by enforcing a hierarchy. That's the way that these portrayals of non-standard masculinity become problematic.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Okay, great. Easy. Awesome. I'll bang this out real quick.
Easy. Awesome.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. That took no time. Hey, we figured it out. All it took was a drunken intellectual debate.
Right. In under an hour, no less.
As it always does. As it always does with you and I, right? We've done this every single time we've gotten together and gotten intellectually drunk.
Right. Speaking of non sequiturs, not that we were speaking of non sequiturs, which is the perfect non sequitur. I just discovered a weird hole in my shorts.
Segue. Wait, what? We were talking about penetration.
Speaking of non sequiturs, which, considering we weren't speaking of non sequiturs, makes it the perfect non sequitur for a non sequitur. We were talking about terrifying leather daddies, and I found a hole in my shorts.
That's definitely not a non sequitur. That's just a Freudian slip.
That's a Freudian hole is what it is.
Your Freudian slip is showing. Your Freudian slip is crotchless.
Yeah. I am wearing underwear,
that's the
though.
title of this one. Yeah, no, this is great. I'm going to just put hierarchy all over my outline right now. I still haven't shared with you, so you're going to be like, okay, stop. But
no, that's fine. I've closed the iPad, so I can't follow things. But because this trope has to where it turns problematic. We've decided how it is problematic, and where it turns toxic is the way that it reinforces our perception of non-straight, non-binary, non-conforming people as less than.
Patriarchy hierarchy. Yep.
And when you can view someone as less than in the real world, you can be cruel to them. You can be abusive. You can be violent. Yes, exactly. Yep. And that's the thing that we, this, I've been waiting kind of to bring this out because this is one of my favorite Dan Savage quotes.
Is it coming out of your hole in your shorts?
No.
Okay.
One of my favorite Dan Savage quotes, and it's actually a quote that echoes to something that they call the tolerance paradox, which is an established thing in philosophy and psychology and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The Dan Savage quote goes, being intolerant of other people's intolerance is tolerance acting in its own defense. And this actually relates back to something that's actually called the tolerance paradox, which is that a society that is truly openly tolerant to everything will eventually allow those people who are the most intolerant to take control of it. And so for a tolerant society to truly be tolerant, it must be ruthless in weeding out those people who are intolerant.
Right. Okay.
So whenever the fucking right wing gets mad at liberals for telling them to shut up. And they go, I thought you were a liberal and you were tolerant. It's like, I am tolerant until you start attacking other people. And then I'm going to be an intolerant motherfucker and smack you down.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the tolerance paradox, is that you cannot, as a tolerant person, tolerate intolerance.
Shit. Yeah, right.
You can tolerate a lot. You can tolerate other sexualities. You can tolerate other religious beliefs. But the minute somebody around you...
tolerate is kind of like, okay, come on.
Right. But
are you just tolerating me, or do you consider me a person?
And fundamentally, to have a functioning society, all you need is to tolerate other people.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
You don't have to agree with them.
Everybody.
I don't have to agree with the tenets of the Church of Satan. I don't have to agree.
Not tenets.
I don't have to agree with the tenets of Christianity or Buddhism. I don't have to agree with any of that. All I have to do is tolerate them, to let them be.
Yeah, right. And that's when it turns into a problem, is when the other...
But if I decide suddenly...
Tenants.
Sorry,
tenants are people who live in an apartment.
I'm slurring my speech, which you should expect to happen.
Intellectual drugs. Okay, sorry, intellectual drugs. Never mind, sorry. But yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And as long as you can at least tolerate...
All we need to expect of people is
fine.
Tolerance. We don't have to demand or
you can go farther, and that's
require acceptance.
Good for you, but
all you need is tolerance.
All you need is tolerance. La, la,
right.
La, la, la.
You don't have to like, somebody's loud music. You don't have to embrace it. You don't have to become a fan of it. You just have to be tolerant of it.
Okay with it. Tolerance is all you need.
And we forget that, but you're not going to have a functional society if you allow intolerance free reign, because then you're allowing someone
everything,
right? Because this is what the fucking right wing is doing right now. Is just, you have to tolerate my bigotry and allow me to be intolerant of other people, or you're not really tolerant. No, fuck you.
No,
you're an asshole. I'm going to shut you down.
Free speech is not hate speech.
Ding 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 ding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Religious freedom is not the freedom to persecute others for their religion, so on and so forth. And
right. Yep. Yeah. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of where this trope has to live.
Yes, it does.
Is in how these characters within the confines and the context of the story.
Yes.
Reinforce patriarchal intolerance and the hierarchy.
Patriarchal exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's
totally going to be a challenging thing to do, because that's a delicate, hidden, fine line. That's like the secret power of patriarchy, man, is that hierarchical enforcement.
Challenge accepted. I find it really interesting
and you are smart enough to do it.
Aw, that's a lovely thing to say. Thank you very much.
What the fuck? People tell me I'm a fucking weirdo, sexist. What are you doing?
You're a weirdo. You're not sexist, but you're a weirdo.
Sorry, I do have cats that test my patience.
They're so cute, though.
I know they're very mad at me because I spent most of the weekend out, but that's another story for after we're recording.
I find it really interesting, the difference between talking about the problematic toxic masculinity tropes and talking about the problematic badass female tropes. Mm-hmm. It's been really interesting. I find it fascinating, and I'm probably going to go more forth in it in more detail, as we go through the next two. But
right.
I think it's really interesting that we're talking so much more about the people that consume the tropes, whereas in the problematic badass female tropes, we're talking a little bit about that and about how the damage that those tropes can cause. Of course I covered it, but it seems like it's really centered on how these tropes are affecting real men and women in real life. And I think that's really fascinating. And I think it's, like you were saying before, we're trying to figure out why.
I agree.
I think it's because, like what you were saying, it's like, well, we've had feminism for a while, and also the fact that like everything is a male character at this point too, like still. So we have sort of more of that to look at. But I don't know. I'm finding it very interesting, and I'm not sure I have any conclusions about it at this point. But I think it's fascinating, and I'm really thankful for all the dialogue about all of it, because it seems like we're opening these tropes up into a lot more context than I was doing in the other ones. Right.
Well, it's not that there is not a lot of social context to the problematic badass female tropes.
Oh, there totally is. Yeah,
there totally is, and that's and probably some of it is like I had said, has something to do with the fact that we've had feminism for quite a long while, and the remedy to poorly portrayed women
is to get more women. But in a patriarchal society,
right? That's not the answer to the problematic male tropes, because most of the media is controlled by. Are making it.
Yeah,
and then you have to get really into the hierarchy. Right.
Yeah.
So the men who are in charge of making the media, they're very invested in maintaining their hierarchical, privileged status.
Oh, and now they're all coming down. They've all been like pedophiles and shit at this point.
Right.
Now they're all like crashing down.
Even then, there's still, even though you have the Harvey Weinsteins who have taken a fall, and some of these other guys that have taken a fall.
The Whedons and
well, Whedon's fall wasn't that precipitous.
No, it wasn't. But
he was not a serial rapist. He was just a philanderer.
No. Right.
Right. And there's a difference. It's not much of a difference. It's
still
not
toxic.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. And it's not that one isn't toxic and the other isn't. But there is a. There is a.
No, it's a gradation, right?
Right, because Harvey Weinstein was.
Or Epstein, right?
Weinstein, like Harvey Weinstein.
No, I know. But I am talking about like what Epstein was doing. Yeah,
we're talking about the media thing, but
no, I know. But I mean, like he was a part of the whole thing too.
Right.
Like he wasn't a media guy, but he was a part of the whole thing. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like there are gradations of like criminality, basically.
Weinstein made his sexual passes, and really put women's career, blatantly put women's career on the line if they did not.
Total casting couch,
on the casting couch thing. Whereas
Absolutely.
I think Whedon's was not any. Whedon's transgressions were not as egregious. He didn't.
Well, it's just, like I said, it's just a hierarchy of like criminality, basically. Like Whedon was a creep.
He was a creep, but he was not.
And Weinstein was a criminal.
Right. And the big sin that Whedon committed was lying to his wife more than anything else.
Right.
Because
which kind of is none of our business.
Right. Which if he and his wife had agreed to mutually agreed to have an open relationship, then his attempting to seduce his female leads would not have been a problem.
And we shouldn't have known about any of that, to be honest, but
Whereas Weinstein saying, if you want this part, fuck me.
Yeah, right. That's yeah. No, there are definitely gradations. I totally agree with that.
So that doesn't make them either one of them less of a creep, just makes one of them more of a criminal.
Right.
More of a lecherous, manipulative, patriarchal douche canoe than the other one.
Douche canoes.
They're both jerks. They're both creeps. But
But anyway, that was just what I wanted to say about that. It's just that I find it very interesting that there's a lot more sort of conversation that opens up these concepts a lot more in these conversations than there were in the other ones. And I just think that's really cool and interesting, and I'm glad.
Because with the female tropes, there's really only one direction, and it's up into the stratosphere of power.
Right.
You have to think of patriarchy as a ladder, and white men are at the top.
Yeah, exactly.
And minority women are at the bottom. And the Combahee River Collective, which was a collective of women of color, lesbians, socialists, and feminists.
Wow.
in the 70s who have been kind of my guiding light politically and socially. My rule, because I was, put this out on the podcast, whatever. I've been a socialist since I was 16. Cool. And when I was in college, I took a philosophy of feminism course, and I had some interesting experiences with that class. I'm not saying
you were talking about that, yeah.
I'm not saying that that's the thing that suddenly makes me brilliant. I'm still a flawed fucking asshole. I'm still a white male in a white male patriarchal society. So and
you're a cis hetero man, yeah.
Right. And I swim in the water, and sometimes it's hard for me to recognize the fact that I'm swimming in water that benefits me.
Yeah, but you totally recognize that though, which makes it
that doesn't mean I don't fall victim to it from time to time.
Of course.
Right? But I have a rule when it comes to, being active in a bigger scope. Mm-hmm. I may still occasionally be an asshole to women I know, but I'm also an asshole to men that I know. So generally, I'm just an asshole. Gender doesn't. Be an asshole. Gender really doesn't have anything to do with it.
No, I know. I'm an asshole too. I'm an asshole. You're an asshole. Wouldn't you like to be an asshole too?
Right. So anyway. The point being is that ever since that course, what I've believed, and I strongly believe it, and this is what I base my political philosophy on, is that I tend to vote with the black ladies. Whoever the women of color are voting for, that's who I'm going to vote for.
That's who you join them.
Because
that's a really good rule of thumb, I would think.
Because the end of the Combahee River Collective says they quoted a writer whose name I can't remember right off the top of my head, and the quote basically goes, "I don't know what role straight white men can play in this revolution since they are the embodiment of the patriarchal structure."
They're what we're rebelling against, right?
Right. And and I've been wrestling with that for, oh my God, it's been almost 30 years since I took that course. How then being a cisgendered straight white male, right? How
of moderate means,
right? I'm not economically powerful in any fucking way, but I do have
but you're not poor.
I'm not poor.
I mean, you're not in poverty. You're not impoverished.
Right. No,
you have a certain power in that way too, is what I'm saying.
Right. And because I'm a straight white male, I can walk into a room and people are going to take me more seriously in this culture than they would if I were anything else.
Right.
Right.
Right. Anything else.
So what can I do to make that statement about there not being a role for straight white males in the revolution against the patriarchy? What can I do to subvert that?
And also, what can you do against the patriarchy to help yourself?
Right.
Is what I would ask.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So what can I do?
What can you do as the man to take down the patriarchy in a way that's totally going to help you too? It really will.
Oh, no, it will. Because I've always known that my certain expression of masculinity is not in line with what's acceptable in the patriarchy.
Well, nothing's exciting. I mean, it's unrealistic. Like we've been talking about this whole time. Hegemonic masculinity is
exactly
completely unrealistic and stupid.
And this is, and part of the reason we're having this range of talking about the social connection of these tropes to the real world more than this one is because we have not in the past historically had this conversation. With feminism, with women tropes, we've had that conversation about where do women belong in society? Why can't they be in charge?
So right.
We can't.
That is a good point.
We're into the fourth or fifth wave of feminist thought and theory.
Sure.
As far as masculine theory in a post-patriarchal society, we haven't even gotten to wave one yet.
No shit.
Right?
That is a really good point. That is a really good point.
We as straight white men have no fucking idea how to be men without being propped up and reinforced by an abusive, violent, degrading system.
Absolutely. Without either being completely just, like you said, abused and like violated by the system and trying to, if you're trying to be a part of the system.
Right.
Or what happens when you oppose the system and take it down? Like what happens to you? How can you be a straight white man then?
Yep.
Like, what's that going to look like? And yeah, you're right. These are conversations we haven't had yet.
Yep.
We really haven't had.
And so for me, my first step is to vote with the black ladies.
That's a great fucking step. Oh my God.
Because if you take women of color and you give them every single opportunity and privilege, you grant them all the access that straight white men have, then you have no reason in this society to discriminate against anybody because of race or gender.
Yep. I really wish listeners you could see like the gestures that Jason is making when he makes these very passionate statements, because it's fucking awesome.
And
it totally like makes a difference. We should do a video podcast.
Despite all of my tendencies towards assholishness and my occasional, tendency to talk down to people, whether they are men or women.
Oh, I give shit to people who aren't intellectual all the time. I'm a fucking elitist. I'm a horrible elitist. I'm terrible. That is great. I really like that. I really like that you just said that.
Can't we do something? Why are so many fucking people? And this is the other thing is that I have to wrestle with it. Patriarchy would be truly beneficial to me because, I have this sneaking suspicion deep down inside that I'm just a mediocre white guy.
Aw, you're not mediocre.
And I don't want... I'm a mediocre white guy, but I don't want this acknowledgement and this recognition of my mediocrity as a white guy to turn into violence and hatred and toxicity, the thing that we're talking about with these podcasts. Yeah. I mean, I have, even though in a lot of other, in the majority of my self, I might be mediocre, I have an above average sense of empathy.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay. And did you ever see that documentary about James Baldwin, I Am Not Your Negro?
Oh, no, I never saw it. No, I saw stuff about it, but I didn't actually watch it.
Please watch that. Oh, my God, that is so
really
beautiful.
Want to.
I watched that fucking thing and I broke down in tears because I'm like going... I realized in two moments, there were two things that I had in that particular moment. I realized that in my life, I had been the kind of person who was a racist, who was insensitive, who was engaged in microaggressions, who was doing the kind of things that made James Baldwin feel like he was less than human.
Oh, my God.
And at the same time, I recognized that this struggle that he had, the struggle that all minorities in this patriarchal bullshit white racist society have gone against, that they have a level of emotional endurance and strength far beyond anything that I can comprehend. And
wow.
And it reached a point in me where I could not fathom how anyone could with any amount of empathy could listen to anything that he had to say and not feel an intense amount of shame and guilt and this need to make amends, to do something right, to do right by this entire segment of our population that we ripped away from their families, from their country, from their place, whatever. We brought them here and we told them they were less than.
Reparations, right? Yeah.
And
wow.
And as a white guy, I don't quite know how to deal with that at times.
Oh, sure.
Except to, start voting with the black ladies.
But that's a great first step, right? Like you're saying, that's a first step. That's really, really fucking important. And
I know that seems trivial, but what that means is you have to actually pay attention to what the women of color are saying that they need in order to live, to get by, to succeed, to advance, to get out of their pit of poverty, and not preaching to them about what they need to do to get out of their pit of poverty, but listening to them.
You're listening to them.
Listening to them tell you, I need childcare. I need help with this. I need a good job. I need a living wage. I need health insurance that does not make me impoverished, that I can afford. I need these things in order to access the rights, the support system that white males have by default, by simply virtue of their birth.
Yep.
And
yeah. Good for you.
When you listen to that shit, and this is why I find it so. After Trump was elected. Oh
man, I don't. My reaction was just. It was disbelief. I think I went through the phases of like the death of a loved one. I was like, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, there's no fucking way. There's no way. That's not possible. And then I was like, okay. And I like couldn't handle it for a while. And then I was like way too down about it. And then I was like angry. And then I went through all the phases.
Right.
I couldn't. Okay. Anyway. Sorry, go on.
But so I was listening to all the. No, that's fine. That's fine. I was listening to all the hot takes, and the the various flipping around of blame as to who was responsible.
The fucking goddamn optimists were like, how bad can it be?
And
they won't let him get that bad. I was like, oh, fuck.
And I heard a lot of people trying to place blame on my region in particular and stuff like this. But I found this one article by an African-American woman who sat there right point blank and basically said in her article, this is white ladies' fault.
Oh, for sure. Oh, I read that one too. I think I did too. What was her name?
I can't remember. I'll have to go and find it. But I posted that. Yep. I reposted that essay onto my Facebook feed, and there was a white lesbian friend of mine who got incredibly angry with me.
Well, of course,
because who basically said, all of these, your history of supporting feminism. How could you post this article that's critical of feminism? And I was like,
you're like white feminism,
white lady feminism. It's critical of white lady feminism. And
read it again. Read it in detail.
I know. because when you take a look at the votings of white women. Oh my God, it was horrible. How did
so many white women voted for that?
How many did that giant percentage of white women vote for that pussy grabbing fucking Cheeto face troll?
Because you know what? Because their husbands are like that.
Right. Because they were protecting their white lady privilege of being attached to a powerful white man, or what they thought to be a powerful was a white man.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And feminism has been fraught. This was the whole point behind the Combahee River Collective statement, was that they felt that feminism was being mostly guided and directed by white ladies, and they weren't speaking to them and their particular needs as women of color.
Which has been true for the first couple of waves, at least, of feminism. It's been very, very privileged. I mean, the whole suffragette thing was mainly just white women. I mean, white women got the vote before anyone else did.
Right. And that's been a schism in feminism that has never been addressed. Is because and what's interesting is that if you actually take a look,
feminism. Sorry.
But we have to understand that there are three components to patriarchy: gender.
Yep. Oh, I really wish everyone could see your gestures. I love your gestures right now. Gender,
and
economy.
Race. So gender, wealth, and race. Those are the three pillars of Western European patriarchy. Gender, wealth, order? And race. Yeah. They can be in any order. All that matters is that if you have all three, if you're a white male and who's wealthy, you're on the top.
Right.
And then the way the patriarchy works is that if you're a white male but poor, you're still on top of anyone who's not male. If you are male and rich, you're still on top of anybody who's feminine.
Right. Okay. No, I see.
Right. If you're feminine and rich, you're on top of some males, as long as they're not white. It's hard to be women and rich in a patriarchal society because everything shifts to the male.
Right.
But so no matter what configuration, no matter what configuration you have in that tripod, if you're missing one of the legs, boop, it doesn't stand.
Right.
And that's the whole point behind patriarchy. And so white ladies who are rich, the only people that they can punt and beat up and suppress are people of color. Because they can't do men. Men are superior to them.
Yeah.
They can do poor people, but only as long as they're not also white.
Right. Or to a certain extent. Then there's the systemic keeping down of the education of poor white and poor other kinds of societies too. I mean, there's a whole reason why you can't possibly give a logical argument to anyone. And if you're white, is a Trump supporter,
if
there's no
rich,
way they don't have any kind of way to understand cognitively a structured argument. Yep. There's no way to even get. They don't even get it. It's just that piss off the libs. That's all they get. They don't. It's all like
part of that has to do
emotion.
Part of that has to do with the way that we have isolated people through underfunding education.
Oh, well, that's exactly what I mean.
Through social media.
It's a systemic keeping down of certain populations where they can't they don't have the education to be able to cognitively understand an argument. That's just not even a part of how I hesitate
to say that people cannot cognitively understand an argument. Instead, what I would say is that they have been trained not to trust, as Bobby used to say, they've been trained not to trust their native intelligence.
That's what I mean. They don't have any way of following an argument because they don't trust it. They don't get it. Because they don't have the right education.
I just wanted to make sure that because my initial empathetic response to what you were saying was that these people are just stupid. They don't know how to get an argument.
Not at all.
And it's not that. It's that they've been trained to distrust intellectualism, to distrust thought. They've been trained to distrust their native intelligence. They've been trained to distrust anything that might enable them to figure and learn their way out of a situation.
Absolutely.
And that's not because they're stupid. That's because somebody has convinced them. Somebody has brainwashed them.
Two things. They've convinced and brainwashed them on the one hand. On the other hand, they have taken away any opportunity that they might have to use their native intelligence for
anything other than basic
survival.
Education. Right. Anything other than basic. Have I fed myself today, and do I have a place to sleep?
Basic survival does not allow you to really be able to use your intelligence in a way that you can. Right. Anyone who's in survival mode can't.
They can't get out of survival mode because they can't afford to spend the energy.
Because they're not allowed to afford to. They're not allowed to come out of that situation. And that's exactly where that voter base is. Right. It's horrible. It's just horrifying.
And that's what
I feel so bad.
That's what extraction capitalism is doing to us right now. Is that it's busy making everybody just poor enough that they can't think about anything other than
just poor enough. Yeah.
Just poor enough that they can't think about anything except the next paycheck to be able to pay their bills and maintain the status quo. You know, when Europeans ask, why aren't Americans protesting? And it's because if we go out and protest, we'll lose our health insurance.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that has happened recently to a lot of people just now.
And if we can't pay for when we're sick, then we go bankrupt because they'll extract the money from us to pay for that stuff, and then we're suddenly homeless on the street, and we can't do anything at that point.
No, exactly. Then we're completely powerless. Which means, of course, that we're completely powerless to begin with.
If it wasn't for the fucking assholes that undercut Reconstruction, we would have a completely different South than we do right now. Because during Reconstruction, before they started undercutting Reconstruction, Reconstruction in the South took white people completely out of fucking power, which was why white people in the North were like all in favor of getting rid of Reconstruction. Oh, man. Yeah. Racism, patriarchy, what's all right there?
I know. I really like hearing people being like, that's not this America. That's never been this America. I'm like, it's been this America since the fucking first day.
Oh, I know. It's like when they started separating families at the border, and it's like, this isn't the America I know. And I want to go, do you remember what they did to the indigenous people? That's totally America.
No, you're right. This is horrible, and it fucking is horrible and sucks and should stop immediately. But it's definitely America. It's
definitely America, because everything we're doing at the border to all of these people from Honduras and Central America, we did that to indigenous people. We did that to the Sioux. We did that to the Cherokee. We did that to every fucking indigenous tribe in this country. We stripped the children away from those families. We put them in schools, and we made them white, whether they wanted to be that way or not.
They didn't. And why should they?
So, anyway, I think we've had our moment.
Polly's side.
So, next time, what's trope number 6?
Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom! Oh, I love Mr. Mom!
Yeah, I want to get Paul back on because he is a wonderful father, single father.
We'll get back to the fun stuff. We'll get to the fun versions of problematic toxic masculinity tropes with Mr. Mom.
I want to get Paul on because he's going to come on and talk about what it's like to be a single dad, and a really, really fucking good one. And also probably be interrupted by his children every 2 seconds, which will be fucking perfect. So I'm hoping... Let's cross our fingers.
Yep. All right. So thanks, everybody, for listening to the rants. We'll be back with Mr. Mom next.
2 and 2.
The Outrider podcast is orchestrated by me, Jason Quinn Malott, and audio production magic is performed by Heather Ann Eden. You can find the show online at jquinmalott.com. And if you would, please hop on iTunes and give us a rating. We'll be back later in 2020 with more mini-series, live shows, and one-on-one conversations with writers, editors, and publishers. Thanks for listening.